Good morning, everyone. Chris from C2 Ventures. Have a dear friend, longtime friend, who happens to be also a part of C2 Ventures, Mark Naples with WIT Strategy, on the line with me today. A few weeks back, I shared a post in our C2V Instagram account, which Matt and I do often on various subjects that are kind of burning or relevant or whatever is on our mind, very similar to Twitter. And it was along the lines, it was around PR. And the idea of the post was to share some feedback that we've heard from other founders in regards to their PR experiences, mostly not that great. So I just shared some comments in regards to our early stage companies and founders discussing, things to look out for and some do's and don'ts. And the audience was really meant to kind of be derived on pre-seed and seed and to build relationships with PR and think about when's the right time to do it, et cetera, et cetera. Through that post, and in a very healthy way, Mark, being a good friend, shared some feedback, giving what he does at WIT and the huge clients that they've been working with for many, many, many years. And there are some things that I missed. There are some things that I think could have been shared or offered as relates to what this topic, what PR is. What is PR strategy? Is there consulting? Rather than sort of a kind of a one-way lens. So I wanted to bring Mark on because luckily these things are dialogues and I'm often wrong. So I wanted to bring Mark on to share some of his thoughts on the topic. Definitely want to hear about WIT, but specifically as relates to PR and how that's defined, how that's perceived, and what can it be. There seems, and Mark, I think we agree on this, there seems to be a lot of misconceptions or misrepresentations of what it is, what it can be, what it should be. Probably something that you don't struggle with your awesome clients because you got a lot of big clients, but probably, you often have to kind of work through the weeds here. So let me kind of pass it over to you. Again, they don't classify themselves as a PR firm, much more on the consultative part and strategy and really thinking about go-to-market beyond just the typical press release, thought leadership, media training, business development, speaking, a lot of other things. So Mark, I'm going to kick it off to you. And to share a little bit about your perspective on the topic, a little bit about WIT, and we'll just go from there.
That's fine. Thanks, Chris. It's funny you say we don't really think of ourselves as a PR firm. It says in the main page of our site that we're not like any other PR firm that you've ever dealt with, but we're going to get better results than any other PR firm that you've ever dealt with. If you're focused on the outcome, the outputs of your partnership with a PR firm, and it's all around clips or around certain, whatever the KPIs are, it's important to understand how they get there. But the big thing for me when you talk about PR is that you can classify every discipline you've just referenced as PR. Business development requires certain relationships. Media relations requires certain relationships. It's all, under the rubric of PR. And in thinking about how I would prepare for this conversation with you, I was thinking about what we did this week and the different domains that we worked in, all with startups, all with pre-revenue companies, and the domain expertise that we have to bring to them in order to add any kind of value at all. So that's what I would always want to start with whenever I'm engaging with somebody, because the notion of a PR firm, people think, what's PR? We're going to write press releases, we're going to put stuff on the wire, we're going to send stuff to reporters. That's been dead for 25 years. I mean,
so Mark, let's stay on that because so we totally agree on that. They help you get in front of reporters. They pitch your story. You get on the wire. Hopefully, you break something at TechCrunch. You raise money, and that's what PR does. And what I'm learning, as it relates to where you guys sit, all those other pillars that I shared prior to this our original conversation, I didn't even bucket as in PR. I didn't.
If you're going to be in a specific domain, and you want to add value to, especially to a startup in a given vertical industry, and you can't do those things, I think it's going to be very difficult for you to add value because the usual tactics that people are used to, and you can waste a lot of money with somebody who's going to try to figure out how to talk to press. I mean, that's just not the thing that they're probably going to need. They probably need market segmentation. They probably need an idea of a go-to-market strategy. People think of this as an MBA's task, but it's not. If you have, it can be, but I've never met an MBA who, doesn't have the domain expertise that could do that. You have to have the domain expertise. If you don't have any relevant experience within the given vertical, I don't know how you add value as a tip of the spear communicator, as a strategist. you know?
Right.
The domain expertise is everything. I mean, the verticals that I've dealt with this week are in fintech, in med tech, and in ad tech, And if we didn't have that domain expertise, but by domain expertise, I don't mean that just that they work in those verticals and sub-verticals, and they know enough to, be dangerous, if you will. But they know what's needed. They understand the market dynamics. They understand what is next, and they can make assertions from an educated perspective.
Right.
At the same time, they have to understand what the reporters and analysts and others in that space need.
Right.
The big thing that's happened in the last 20 years and a lot of people talk about this stuff, as there's fewer and fewer reporters that matter, there's fewer and fewer outlets that matter, and there's paywalls. Now you have to be really precise about how you're going to position a story. And you have to have an engagement with the reporters that you're going to add value every time you touch them. So one of the rules that we've had in our firm for the 20 years that we've been in business is that if you don't have an ongoing relationship with a reporter, if you haven't actually been in a critical conversation with them about something they've covered or about something you published with them, then you can't pitch them. There's no hat in hand pitching from us. You have to have an ongoing dialogue. And if we are outside of our domain expertise or outside of that expertise with reporters, we're not going to go after that business. Okay. So anybody can pitch a reporter. I mean, Morrissey used to tell me that he got pitched 350 times a day, 400 times a day. And I'm sure that it's still true for a lot of people in our state. How do you engage with a reporter? How do you engage with an editor and actually add value for them with everything you're talking about? It can't be just about your clients. It has to be about the actual vertical, the segment that they cover. You have to help them get smart about something. And
right.
The thought leadership portion of PR, if you will, is that you're doing that from the point of view of your client. Ideally, you are. Okay, now that's cool. And that a good PR firm can do that. A really sophisticated PR firm will shape the POV of that client, the point of view of that client, to be the most strategic for the reporter. We've had clients that have come to us as startups and they think they're going to sell this product to this segment. And we say, actually, no, the bigger need is tailor the messaging around that product, around the tech to this segment. Instead of selling, there's one that really stands out, that was acquired 13 months later, that they wanted to sell to publishers. That no, what you really want to do is sell to this new thing called programmatic desks, trading partners, and here you need to learn more about this. So the first part of our engagement with them was discovery for them through us. So what are we then? Are we a PR firm? Sure. Are we a market analyst? Sure. Are we researchers? It's all PR.
It's all PR. So
PR.
Mark, to get into, obviously our world is pre-seed, seed, early stage companies that are, at the pre-seed, they're raising 700 to $1 million. At the seed, they're raising 2.5 to 3.5. They're, they have product market fit. They have revenue. They have customers. It's early days, in particular where we get involved. I'd love for you to share some points or some key takeaways or things for these founders to consider along their journey and what they should be thinking about and doing as relates to, because I think we've definitely covered this sort of over this larger umbrella of PR, which is important to get awareness of, so it doesn't get so sort of diced up. But what should they be doing? How should they be thinking about it? How can they do things that, and I'm sure, the idea that you and I talked about as well is for much larger companies, they have significant budgets. I would say that maybe a late stage A with millions of dollars of business or revenue, B, they can start affording to really make this a meaningful line item, so long as it's driving results. But what would be your advice to founders on this particular topic?
They have to have an objective-based focus. So if it's around press, then they have to think in terms of what does a successful press campaign look like. By and large, a startup, that's not what they're after. They might think that they want to look good in a certain trade publication, but the fact is they probably have to get their core messaging down. They probably have to do what John Durham used to talk about, have the 7th floor elevator pitch and the 3rd floor elevator pitch, the condensation of their messaging, the distillation. They probably have to do a lot of that. Now, they may think that they've already done it well because they've raised some money, but the fact is they probably have to simplify it more to the market, because the people that they're raising money from probably know they're saying it better than, the press does, and better than the buyers might, if they want to be really strategic. So the first thing has to be What is their objective? Core objective. If it is press, fine. What's the headline look like? Where are you going? Who do you want to have saying what in your headline? That's something that some of the people that are really very, very successful in our business always start with that. And it can be kind of annoying when you're going in because there's so much gummy thought that has to go into a core strategy. But to stay focused on that sort of, teleological outcome-based thinking is a discipline. And guys like, I think of someone like Scott Howe is really, really good at that. He would always bring me back to what is that, when we were working with him at Axiom. It's important. Okay. Now, if you're trying to alter a segment, you really want to get somebody smart about the way you think it's going to, what's going to happen next. You're going to change thinking around something. You have to be willing to engage with reporters in a way that's solicitous. You're not looking for coverage necessarily. You're trying to help them understand what's next. That requires a level of engagement that honestly, about half of the people we've ever worked with are capable of. They're just not. They want to talk at reporters. They want to sell to reporters. And you have to have a level of intellectual charity that most don't. So training them toward that is vital. Being able to do that in the market, not just reporters, but like with analysts and others, is vital. That's a hard discipline. I mean, it's not just media training. We do a lot of media training. I've done hundreds of media trainings myself, but getting somebody to understand that and understand how to convey value within, an amorphous, not yet developed segment is hard. It's really hard.
Mark, how would you potentially, obviously you and I come from kind of ad tech and media through our careers. We don't really do consumer anymore. I always feel, my humble opinion, that consumer businesses are, I think, a much easier story to tell. It's a product that does X. It's a drink that does this. It's a CBD, this, sports, what. It's very easy for people like consumer, but enterprise B2B, takes me, the slow guy in the room, 100 times sometimes understand even what our companies are doing, right? Any thoughts or advice, given that that's our center for the enterprise B2B and NPR? Should you think of things differently from a consumer perspective or B2B as it relates to audience?
It's a really interesting question. And I love the way you came at it because it's the exact opposite perspective I have. I think consumer's impossible. I think consumer PR, unless you
Mark, if we were agreeing on everything, it wouldn't be an interesting conversation.
That's how it started, right? Consumer PR to me is big budgets, a lot of misses. If you have a 1.5 or 2 to 1 ROI, then you're really succeeding. B2B to me is, let's put it this way. Consumer is shotgun. B2B is rifle. I cut my teeth long before there was something that's called ad tech. I was a regulatory affairs guy in a firm, a very specialized firm called Kearns & West in DC. And we were trying to cite nuclear storage facilities. And we were trying to change electric, we were doing with FERC and the NEI and like all these other different associations around energy, really amorphous stuff, very, very difficult, abstruse stuff. And one of the things that we focused on was stakeholder communications. I learned so much about stakeholder communications from these people, Ken Kearns, and it was focused on what's called No Surprise 35. In any vertical industry, there are about 3 dozen people that can either make or break your product or your service, your brand. And what you have to do is understand who they are, how to reach them, how to inculcate them, whether they're willing to be inculcated, and if they can become champions, what people now call influencers, right? If you can't do that in an ad tech, that's why it works so well with ad tech, as ad tech has evolved. If you can't do that within these sub verticals and you're creating these other verticals, then you can't succeed. So if you think about when we started this thing, I was the managing editor at AOL in '96. I was working with David Morgan at Real Media in 2000. It was just starting. Digital was less than 3% of the media spend then. We were hoping to get. I didn't have any ad budget. we were just hoping to reach a few people. But then as that evolved, and there's a different segment, and there's different players within each segment. Half the folks that were really, really junior folks then became C-level folks, in our world. And, understanding how these people can help shape where you're going is really important. In every vertical that has at least $1 billion in revenue in it, that's true. There's people like that in every vertical. I worked in fiberglass. I worked in fiberglass insulation. The No Surprise 35 thing really worked then. That was on behalf of the asbestos bar in the early 90s. Every vertical industry has something like that. If the PR firm that you're working with, that you founder are talking to, doesn't have those relationships, they're not the right firm. Period.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, Mark. All right, so to kind of close out here, you're a C2V founder. You're a founder within our community, our network. This is something that you're trying to get your head around. You want to tell your story. You want to build a strategy. You want to have a conversation with you and your team. You want to talk to WIT. What is let me try to you can kind of answer this however you wish. When's the right time to have a conversation? When do you engage? When's the right time?
I would engage if I'm a founder and I have a clear idea about where I'm going with my what segment I'm trying to get at, and I understand, what my product or my service is and how it's going to fit there. I would engage with somebody external as early as possible. We've had success with big companies, Spotify's my client, a lot of publicly traded companies around the world, which is great. But the big successes we've had have been when somebody has hired us before they've hired somebody else, or they've hired an employee. If you talk to people like Scott Meyer at Evidon and others, the insight that someone like we can give a founder, not just around how to go to market, or how to influence coverage, but also who to hire. That's PR too. It's HR, sure, but helping him segment within his own HR function. Like if, for instance, if Scott, and he would be fine with me talking about him here, if he was going to hire somebody and he thought really strongly about him, but I knew that other company that this guy had come from and what had really happened there, that's helpful to him, right?
Right.
So the consultant that you hire, and yes, this is more consulting than PR. The consultant you hire to help there can help your PR downstream in ways that you can't even foresee. It's beyond. It's all PR. Jeff Herzog used to say the same thing, the founder of iCrossing. It's all PR, especially in a closed market. When he hired us, they were an 18-person firm in 2002, 18-person firm based in Scottsdale. He had been delisted on Google, Jeff personally, and iCrossing was delisted on Google. So he hires me to, first of all, get him listed again because he had been using daily pages. He had done something wrong, right? And he had been blasting them and to others. So I have to get him back on Google, get his firm back on Google, and then try to figure out what's different about them. Differentiation, that's the juicy thing about working B2B. Differentiation of an individual company or service within a difficult to differentiate segment is a real challenge. That's where thought leadership and point of view come in,
And Mark, not put you on the spot, but I think it's an important one. When it pertains to the early stage companies and budgets and things like that, as you can imagine, runway and cash management, in particular, guys like us always ensuring that cash is being managed. And these are companies often on kind of shoestring. Is it possible to engage at those early stages, without a Spotify budget?
Of course. Yeah, we've had budgets over the years that were as small as $5,000 a month.
Yep.
If somebody's not willing to engage that way, and they're going to complain to you about, you're over, you're too much time or something like that. Scope creep is a problem in a lot of cases, but if somebody's going to complain about the time part, that means they're probably not as engaged as you want them to be.
Right.
I mentioned the Evidon case. It's almost embarrassing to say we were producing millions of dollars of press every year for those guys. And it was, the high, that was $7,000 a month, I think, something like that.
So Mark, any final words here before we kind of close out, make sure that people actually listen through, but I'll just add this quickly and let you have last word. Again, important topic. Our role as kind of stewards here at early stage is to try to share as much information that we think is valuable to founders, make introductions, all the things that our operator bench provides. And this is definitely a topic that, and I'm glad this is a great sort of starting point to create more clarity. And I think, Mark, I think every founder wants it in some capacity, but probably understanding how to do it is always the question mark. So the plug here certainly for you guys is WIT Strategy, which is witstrategy.com, WIT Strategy.com. Check them out. Want an intro to Mark? I'm happy to make it. And Mark, thanks for shining some important light on the topic. But I'm going to let you have kind of final word here.
Thanks. No, thanks. It's a sweet little plug. WIT stands for whatever it takes. I mean, I've done everything from being a bagman for the DNC back in the day to changing legislation at the state level to writing legislation in other places. I mean, that's all before ad tech was even born. There's a lot of ways to move the needle for clients. And if somebody's going to engage with you and you want them to be the one, then in that first conversation, they should give you ideas. If they're not bringing you ideas, if all they're talking about is their press contacts or, we've got great writers on our staff or something like that, then chances are they aren't the ones. If they're not giving you ideas right from the get-go about your business, then go somewhere else.
Ooh, we're gonna close that on there. Awesome, Mark. I appreciate the time and the conversation. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.